Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found himself in a strange and troubling place by the early 1970s. As his fame reached new heights, so did his paranoia and mean-spirited behavior. A man who was once known for his charm and generosity began to turn inward, suspecting everyone around him of only caring about the money and perks that came with being part of his entourage. This change was fueled by his heavy drug use, which clouded his judgment and made him increasingly unpredictable. It all started when Elvis's old friends, who had been with him since the glory days of the 1950s, began to drift away. He thought they were only there for the fame and fortune, not out of true loyalty. As a result, he started treating them with a harshness that shocked even his closest friends. Joe Esposito, who used to manage Elvis's group, noticed a dark change in the king. "Elvis got really mean," he said. The once tight-knit group was now filled with fear and tension. Elvis's entourage was like a pressure cooker of jealousy and backstabbing. He, however, believed he was the victim. He started to see even his old friends as traitors, a belief that grew stronger with each passing day. To make matters worse, Elvis's drug use made him act on these suspicions without thinking. He became bossy and cruel, reminding everyone who was in charge. His behavior was often erratic, fueled by the drugs he was taking. Despite this, Elvis still had a few loyal members in his entourage, like Lamar Fike. But they too grew tired of the constant mistreatment. They left to find new paths outside of Elvis's world. To replace them, he brought in younger people, like his own relatives, who were more like employees than friends. This only added to Elvis's worries about loyalty. As time went on, Elvis's fixation on security became obsessive. With his connections, he managed to get permission to carry concealed weapons, which he flaunted in front of visitors and even his own team. This habit led to some scary incidents. More than once, guns went off accidentally, putting innocent people in danger. Elvis didn't care. He continued to brandish his weapons, firing them at random objects like television sets and chandeliers. One time, he even shot at a hotel toilet, causing laughter among those present. The entourage tried to be more careful with their firearms, but they too got into trouble. Encouraged by Elvis's tough image and his tales of imagined threats, some members, including Red West and Sonny West, started beating up people trying to enter Elvis's suite. This led to lawsuits and bad publicity, which angered Elvis and Vernon even more. Eventually, they fired Red and Sonny West, but Elvis had already set a dangerous precedent. He had encouraged this behavior, seeing it as a way to prove loyalty. Elvis's spending habits were just as alarming. Earning over $5 million a year, he spent freely on himself. He bought expensive cars, rare weapons, clothes, and jewelry. Graceland, his home, became a showcase of his extravagance, with lavish rooms and a jungle-themed den. He even bought lavish airplanes, which he used to fly around at a moment's notice, often to impress new girlfriends. But Elvis's spending was not just about material goods. He was also incredibly generous, often to a fault. He showered his family, friends, and even strangers with expensive gifts. His jewelry purchases were so frequent that local jewelers would travel to Vegas just to sell to him. He bought guns as gifts and even tried to give a revolver to President Nixon. Despite the warnings from his family about his spending, Elvis couldn't stop. In fact, when they confronted him, he bought them gifts as a way to silence them. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was worried sick about his son's spending. He feared they were heading towards bankruptcy, but Elvis didn't listen. Instead, he bought Vernon a new Mercedes as a response. When Vernon and Priscilla tried to talk some sense into him, Elvis exploded, leaving town in a fit of rage. His relationship with Priscilla had already broken down, and now he was surrounded by people who depended on his generosity, leaving him with no real power to control them. They had no reason to restrain his spending sprees. Elvis's descent into this chaotic lifestyle was a stark contrast to his earlier days. Once a beacon of hope and joy, he had become a shadow of his former self, lost in a world of paranoia, excess, and self-destruction. Elvis Presley's love for spending money and giving gifts to others was well known. He got this habit from watching TV shows like The Millionaire, where a wealthy character gave away big sums of money. Elvis wanted to share his good fortune, much like many people who suddenly become rich after a long time of struggling. However, his love for spending soon became a problem. As Elvis's spending habits grew, they started to hurt his career. He was spending more money than he earned, which worried his family, especially his father Vernon. Elvis had a habit of buying things just to feel good, which wasn't helping his financial situation. He also used money and gifts to keep his team happy, but this became a problem when it started to affect his work. His addiction to drugs didn't help, as it made him want to spend even more and use gifts to control those around him. This behavior became compulsive and started to threaten the family's finances. Elvis's spending was not just irresponsible, it was also hurting his career. By the mid-1970s, he was spending more than he earned. This reckless spending limited his career choices and tied him to certain business strategies focused on quick money. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, also contributed to the problem with his own gambling debts, making him just as reliant on quick cash infusions. This led to more concert tours, which were lucrative but exhausting. These tours left Elvis too tired to work on new music or other projects. To solve these issues, RCA and Felton Jarvis arranged for Elvis to record at Stax Studios in Memphis in July 1973. RCA needed new material after the success of the Aloha from Hawaii concert album. They hoped these sessions would yield enough songs for a pop album, a gospel album, and 2 singles, but the sessions turned out to be a disaster. Elvis was late, uninspired, and visibly under the influence. The songs they did manage to record were not good, and the first single, Raised on Rock, was a commercial failure. Despite this setback, Elvis returned to Stax in December 1973, this time after recovering from a Demerol addiction. He was more productive, completing 18 songs in a week. However, these songs didn't translate into commercial success. His ballad, I've Got a Thing About You Baby, sold 500,000 copies but barely made it to the top 40. RCA then heavily promoted his next few singles, but even these only charted moderately well. A major mistake by RCA might have made things worse. For over a decade, they had resisted releasing compilation albums of Elvis's older songs. But after negotiating with Colonel Parker, RCA bought the rights to Elvis's entire catalog of pre-1973 recordings for $5,400,000. This allowed RCA to release old material they had been wanting to use. The money was split between RCA and Colonel Parker, as part of a new agreement giving Parker half of any new deal's profits. RCA also signed Elvis to a new 7-year contract, requiring him to produce 2 albums and 4 singles each year. This was meant to get Elvis working again and bring in more money, however, it soon became a problem. As Elvis struggled to find inspiration to record, Colonel Parker had to release all kinds of unusual material to meet the contract demands. This included live albums, random song collections, and even a humorous album of Elvis's stage monologues. The release of Elvis, a Legendary Performer, Volume 1, a greatest hits album, did well, selling 750,000 copies. But it only made people think of Elvis as an oldies act. This was exactly what Colonel Parker had feared, that releasing old material would hurt sales of new music. In the following years, reissues kept outselling new releases, solidifying this image of Elvis as a legacy act rather than a contemporary artist. As time went on, Elvis Presley's music sales began to drop. His new songs weren't getting much play outside of country radio. This made him rely even more on touring to earn money and feel good about himself. In 1974, he was on the road for weeks, playing shows across the country. These tours made him millions, but smaller events like his time in Las Vegas and Lake Tahoe brought in far less money. Despite these financial ups and downs, Elvis's fans remained incredibly loyal. They saw him more than just a singer, he was a symbol of their own experiences and struggles. When Elvis faced criticism, especially from media, his fans would stand by him. This support was especially important when Elvis started doubting himself and his team. Elvis's reliance on his fans became both a strength and a weakness. On one hand, it created a strong bond, almost like a religious connection, between him and his followers. This bond made his concerts feel special and helped keep his fans devoted, even after his death. However, it also made Elvis hesitant to try new things. He feared disappointing his fans, so he kept performing the same popular songs rather than risking trying something new. Elvis often chose safe, well-known songs that he knew would get cheers from the crowd, rather than introducing new material that might not be as well received. This approach had worked for him for years, but by the 1970s, the music world was changing. New, smaller groups were forming and targeting specific audiences. Elvis, with his broad appeal and huge fan base, could have explored new paths. However, his desire to stay the biggest star prevented him from taking those risks. Elvis's manager, Colonel Parker, shared similar views. Both men believed in sticking to what worked and appealing to the broadest audience possible. While they disagreed on some things, their views aligned more often than not. Parker didn't push Elvis to explore new directions in music or film because he understood Elvis's deep-seated need to be the biggest star. Their similar mindsets meant that even when they had arguments, they usually didn't change their approach to Elvis's career. Elvis always aimed to be the most successful star, and anything less felt like failure to him. A different manager might have steered Elvis toward different paths, but Parker's influence kept Elvis focused on maintaining his image and popularity. In the end, Elvis's connection with his fans was both his greatest strength and his biggest challenge. While it provided unwavering support and created a devoted subculture, it also trapped him in a cycle of playing it safe. He could have taken risks and explored new music and acting opportunities, but his fear of disappointing his fans and his own ambition kept him on the path he knew best. This path, while commercially successful during his lifetime, left little room for artistic growth or change.